What's up, everyone? Welcome to today's video. Welcome to the Video Game Fight School channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. I want to make an argument today. I think Marvel's Spider-Man 1 and 2, has its influence from somewhere in the 90s. Now, this is crazy because every time I look at this game, I think the creative crew, the creative leadership, seem to have been very influenced by the Spider-Man cartoons that were very popular in the 90s. They did not have too many episodes of these series, but man, I can tell you that they really did have a huge impression on fans of superheroes back in the day. Now, in my time watching these, I used to watch this in the 90s actually when, they were airing on TV. I don't know if it was along the same time. I just know I was a little kid and on Saturday mornings they would show these. But one episode really made a huge impression on me. And this is not because we're going to see Lizard or Hunter in the Spider-Man series. Yes, those two characters were in those animated cartoons. Even though they didn't air that long, they were still able to bring in these iconic villains for Spider-Man. But it was very interesting overall to be able to see this. So what we're going to do is this particular episode in that series, we're going to read the fandom wiki page and talk about the story. I think when we do this, it'll make some sense as to what it is that you're already seeing with how they're actually marketing Marvel Spider-Man 2's gameplay. Already you can see there is gameplay. This is from a channel called Real Token. I don't know where they got the gameplay from. I don't want to show anything, but I will do some snapshots. Again, we see another heavy chase with Peter Parker and Lizard. If you guys remember that in the unveiling that we got to see at the PlayStation event, we saw a huge chase scene as well that involved not only, Lizard, but this time it involved Lizard and Miles Morales as they were going through this water scene with the Hunter and all of their minions. So this is a very interesting set of paradigms. And I think if you actually go back and look at the context as to what I think is the huge influence, it will probably start to resonate with you, or at least the hypothesis of the context, it might start to resonate with you. So Night of the Lizard is the very first episode of Spider-Man, the animated series. This episode introduces Spider-Man, the Lizard, and several other supporting characters that would appear throughout the series. Now, as Spider-Man stares into the city, he shoots his web, swings off. Meanwhile, in a subway tunnel, two maintenance workers are attacked by a giant humanoid lizard. One escapes, but the other gets captured. Whoa! I don't know if you guys remember, but let's keep going. The subway worker who escapes still believes that the creature is after him, so he drives away like a maniac. Spider-Man spots him from above, and Web swings after him. As Spider-Man lands on top of the van, he orders the driver to stop. This distracts the subway worker. He almost crashes, but swerves out of the way just in time. However, the van heads for the river. At the last moment, Spider-Man saves him before his van plunges into the bottom of the pier. The subway worker then talks hysterically about a creature with red eyes, which Spider-Man brushes off as nothing. Now, the characters in this particular episode are quite interesting. So let's keep going. Later, that day, at the Daily Bugle, editor Joseph Robertson gives Peter Parker an assignment to take a photo of the lizard. Peter asks who this J. Jonah Jameson, who this is. J. Jonah Jameson walks in and tells him that if he ever got here on time, he would know what's going on. At the moment, Eddie Brock walks in and says if this wasn't serious, he would have gotten the assignment. So a lot of people have been talking about Eddie Brock being the Venom. Even on the wiki fan pages, they even go ahead and, they refer to this Venom here. And you'll see that, even eventually Eddie Brock becomes, this Venom that you can see in many iterations of Spider-Man. In fact, even here in the same series, we're seeing that Eddie Brock is a person. This is why I think a lot of people are making this connection that the Venom in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is going to be Eddie Brock. I guess, some of you who may be wondering, this is probably where some of the fans are getting it. There's probably literature also behind it, but I don't read a lot of comic literature. You guys usually recommend stuff for me to read anyways. So this is what I think the correlation is. Now, let's keep going. Eddie walks in and says that if this wasn't serious, he would have gotten the assignment. Jameson then hands Peter a photo of the subway worker who went missing, and Eddie told him he has a list of scientists who work on reptiles. As Peter learns that one of the names is Dr. Kirk Connors, he says he is one of his teachers, and he's an expert in recombinant DNA and mutagenics. Jameson then gives the job interviewing Kirk Connors to Peter Parker, then mentions that he believes that this is just a hoax, but he accepts the job. Jameson tells him whoever gets a picture of the lizard first will receive a bonus of $1,000. Later that night, Peter returns home excited about what he could buy if he got $1,000. However, he learns that his Aunt May is in financial trouble. He decides that if he gets the money, he will give it to her. This is core Spider-Man. This is Stan Lee's Spider-Man. Peter, as Spider-Man, then crawls into the sewer in search of the lizard. At first, he believes the lizard is just an urban legend, but finds a giant footprint, takes a picture of it. A few minutes later, Peter takes a photo of the Empire State University to show it to Dr. Connors. On his way to the lab, Peter is stopped by Deborah Whitman, another ESU student. As they walk into the building, Eddie Brock hears them and hides. Peter then hears a noise coming from the lab, and his spider senses go off. Every light in the building then goes off. As they enter the lab, Dr. Connors warns them to stay away. Deborah runs up to try and help him, but discovers that isn't Kirk Connors, but instead it's the lizard. Deborah then screams for Peter's help, and the lizard jumps out the window. Peter attempts to chase after him, but Deborah begs him not to leave her alone. Peter then recalls about an experiment he helped the doctor with. During the experiment, Peter took blood from a lizard and injected it into a mouse that's missing one leg. Dr. Connors then exposed the mouse to radiation from a device called the Neogenic Recombinator. I love the way they use a scientified Spider-Man, man. And the mouse regrew its leg. Then, as Dr. Connors touches his shoulder with a lost arm, he says they will do the same thing for human beings. Peter is then shown in his Spider-Man costume, and he wonders why anybody would want to kidnap Dr. Connors. He then swings away through the city. Now, all of this is going on, and something is very interesting to me as, you start to, take a look at all this stuff, because at the end of the day, I strongly believe that the storyline that you're going to get in Marvel Spider-Man 2 is going to be heavily influenced by this particular this is going to be the nexus point. You're going to see it heavy as, in my opinion anyways, that homage to what this particular animation did. Now, why am I throwing this out there? I think the creative team that is making Spider-Man is heavily influenced, or at least filled with people whose Spider-Man influence is actually from this source, or at least sources surrounding this particular material at the time that they were also in their youth. Now, I'm not calling anybody old, or I'm not calling anybody young or whatnot. I'm just saying that if we were to calculate the age or the age group of a lot of the creatives, I would not be surprised that they are very well aware of this Spider-Man, and its influence, and they're actually fans of it. Because for some reason, I just see a lot of that in different tropes like highlights. Or maybe I could just be crazy, and it's actually as a result of a lot of the Spider-Man literature and so on and so forth. But also, they take it to a whole different level. This is something that's very interesting, and we're going to talk about it here very soon. So let me keep reading this. In another part of the city, a lizard is shown crawling out of the sewer up to the house. Inside the house, his wife and son, Margaret and Billy, are in the kitchen cooking. As Margaret looks around, she sees someone and shouts to stay away. However, it's just Spider-Man, who tells her that he's just looking for Kurt. Margaret then tells him she won't let him get hurt, much to Spider-Man's confusion. Outside the Connors' home, Eddie Brock is attacked by the lizard. However, he runs away before the lizard can bring harm to him. Spider-Man then goes outside and takes a photo of the lizard, but accidentally drops a camera in a water puddle. As Spider-Man swings around, the lizard picks up Billy's tricycle and throws it at him. However, Spider-Man dodges the attack and then attempts to shoot a web at the lizard, but he catches it and throws Spider-Man into Billy's treehouse. Margaret and Billy emerge outside, and the son calls the lizard Daddy. The lizard then vanishes into thin air. Spider-Man then walks up to Margaret and asks if he heard Billy right. Margaret then replies that the lizard is Kurt. She goes on to tell Spider-Man that Kurt exposed himself to the radiation from the Neogenic Recombination after injecting himself with the lizard DNA. It worked to regrow his arm, but also turned him into a man-sized lizard. Spider-Man then hears Eddie run away. He chases after him and catches him in his web, then tells him he won't let him ruin the doctor's life. At that moment, his spider senses go off. He web swings back to the Connors' house. Then he asks Billy where his mother was. Billy replies that his father came back and took her into the sewer. As Spider-Man enters the sewer, he hears Margaret's voice. He follows the sound of it. He then comes across the missing subway worker who's held in a cage, and Spider-Man frees him. The worker then mentions Lizard needed his help in building some kind of machine. At the moment, Spider-Man hears Margaret scream again, and he follows the sound of her voice. This was a very intense episode, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I don't understand if I'm doing a good job. I think I may suck at this, but in reading the narrative of this particular episode, you just cannot fathom it. It would be nice for us to be able to do a watch and critique, but, it now has made its way into, the collection of a big company that has acquired the rights to it. So I don't need that smoke on my channel. But at the end of the day, some of you know exactly what this episode is. So you are probably envisioning it from what you had seen back in the day. It's just something that's actually pretty cool. But let's keep going because I think it's something that we need to just go through and then we'll talk about as, time goes on. Now, as Spider-Man web swings across the room, he grabs a neogenic recombinator. Hold on. Spider-Man catches up with the Lizard. This is where I am. The Lizard tells Margaret that the reason he kidnapped her was because he needs her to operate a neogenic recombinator. That's because his hands are too big to operate the controls. The Lizard says he's about to use it to turn everyone in the city into lizard creatures. Margaret attempts to convince the Lizard that what he's doing is wrong. While she does that, Spider-Man attacks him. Kurt then totally loses control of his mind to the reptile side and becomes an unthinkable monster. Margaret then picks up the neogenic recombinator and the Lizard accidentally hits her with his tail. The neogenic recombinator flies across the room. As Spider-Man web swings across the room, he grabs the recombinator. The Lizard then tackles him and they both fall into the water below. During their battle, Spider-Man activates the neogenic recombinator, which turns the Lizard back into a human. However, the mutated blood is poured down the drain. Spider-Man grabs a camera and then takes them back home. Now, this is my favorite part of the entire episode because it was so funny to me because Eddie Brock makes a bet with J. Jonah Jameson. So he says the next day, Brock drags J. Jonah Jameson to Kurt Connor's house to show him pictures of the Lizard. Jameson has his doubts that Connors is the Lizard, and Eddie says that if he's wrong, he will eat today's issue of the Daily Bugle. I remember this scene so well. It says, after Eddie rings the doorbell, Kirk opens the door and greets Mr. J. Jonah Jameson and hands Eddie the newspaper and asks if he likes it raw or cooked. With that gruff voice of it, how do you like it? Raw, cooked, or raw? I remember the only way I searched for this is I just typed this into, let me see if I can go back to my search result. I said, I'll eat this newspaper, Mr. Jameson, if you want to cook raw or cooked. That's how I actually found this episode. I was looking, I was like, man, did anybody document this thing out here? And behold, it pulled it up from the Google search. Back at Peter Parker's house, let me see. Peter hands out May the money for her bills. May asks where he got the money. Peter answers that he got the money by selling an exclusive photo to the Daily Bugle. As May looks at Peter's photo of Spider-Man finding the Lizard, she tells him that he must have had germs on him from heading into the sewer. May is about to make Peter a bowl of hot soup. Sometime later, Spider-Man swings through New York City. He then says that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are stuck. So this was a very remarkable episode, and I don't think if you have the opportunity to make a Spider-Man game, you will abandon this body of work. So part of me is tempted to say that we are seeing the result of a generation that was heavily influenced by not only just, Spider-Man as a whole, but this is the Spider-Man that many of these folk grew up with. Remember, Spider-Man did not hit the cinema, the movie scene, till around 2000 and something. I remember the very first Spider-Man movie marketing. I thought this must be insane that they're going to bring a Spider-Man to the movie scene. This is in my time anyways. If there's a previous Spider-Man movie, let me know. But I doubted that there was. Spider-Man was coming to the big screen. And it was a huge, huge deal, if you get what I mean. But keep in mind that the creatives of the time that the Spider-Man movies were, becoming a thing, their generation, was influenced by the Spider-Man material that was actually available. And maybe some of the 90s Spider-Man, would have been a huge influence, which I think that was also the case. There's no doubt about that as well. But you should also see something that I thought was actually quite interesting. Now, what this was, and it really surprised me because not only was it just, interesting, it was the fact that if you actually, can stomach it, and there's a spoiler coming for those of you who may want to, stay clear of spoilers, just maybe not look. But if you can stomach it, you'll see that the way they depict the chase scenes with Lizard on, on the highway, the busy roads, is also kind of movie perfect in a sense. Like they implement the Spider-Man depiction that you get to see with Spider-Man and the villains in the middle of the city, the showdown type Spider-Man that we've seen for different villains. If you watch the Spider-Man litany of motion picture, you will see these incidences play out on the big stage, and the big stage is the big city of New York. We saw it with Mr. Negative. We saw it in the movie with in the middle of the road and all of that stuff. Guys and girls, this is a huge, huge homage more than anything else. And I think this is where real Spider-Man fans, core Spider-Man fans, are going to gain a different level of enjoyment from actually playing this game. This is my argument, and I think this is why, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is going to be an iconic game. I don't know about gameplay mechanics. I don't know about all the systems and all the new whatevers. Yes, Insomniac is going to improve on all that, but man, this must be kept in mind that, this is just going to be a small part of what makes the game actually solid, to be honest with you guys. I think those aspects are going to be super cool because at the end of the day, when you think about all of this, it is what I think is going to make Spider-Man quite a formidable game because it holds itself at the core of where the fans, really appreciate the character and most of his representation across the board. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for watching. Peace out.